Hey y'all, it's Jessica here from Just Give Me Jesus. It's been a while since I've been on, but today I'm bringing you a page from my art journal. I just needed to get back into it. So I'm taking a 5x7 playing card. It's one of the jumbo cards. I found a pack of them at Tuesday mornings a while back, and I had put some white gesso on it, and I just added some acrylic paint. That's just a page out of an old Bible concordance I found at a thrift store that I sprayed with Tim Holtz Distress Spray Stain and Tumbled Glass. And I really like the way the background looks, but I never leave it like I like it, I guess. So I start adding other things to it. And I'm gonna do some collaging with some different pieces of paper. So I'm just playing around with some things that I like and kind of how they might look on there. And I found this old envelope, security envelope. It's not actually that old. My son had pulled it out of an envelope stack. So I grabbed it so it wouldn't get a waste and tore part of it because I liked the pattern on it. And I'm just still adding some pieces of a page that I found on my desk. A lot of these are just bits and pieces I found on my desk, and even though I like the background, I couldn't leave it there, so I collaged on top of it. And then I'm adding heavy gesso. It's Art Basics heavy gesso, and it's a little bit thicker of a gesso, and I do like how it turns out, but it took a little while for it to dry on this material in this playing card, so I worked on that for a while. And I have an idea of what I want to do on this because I'm kind of leaning toward an inky face. And so I pulled out my all pencil and started there. And I did it with the gray pencil to start with, but it wasn't blending quite as well as I wanted it to. So I ended up moving to black at some point, because it tended to blend and give me a little more shading with what I was wanting for this piece. And I'm now realizing it wasn't actually the all pencil in black that I used. It was a charcoal Nor Gioconda, maybe? I thought it was the all pencil I picked up on my desk, but it wasn't. So I'm just blending that on the gesso until I kind of get a look I like, and I have to play with faces for a long time before I really like them, so to speak, because I'm just not happy usually with them for a while. So I continue to work with it and work with it and work with it, and then I decide I'm going to pull out some watercolor because I'm just still not real happy with the inky way this looks, and her eyes were just not making me happy for a long time. They were too small, then they were kind of big and scary looking. So I went back and worked on those. And I'm fixing to pull out here, once I dry that inky look, I'm going to pull out my Jane Davenport watercolors, one of those sets, and mix it up to get a decent skin tone. It was not my favorite, but it worked. I could not find my Daniel Smith watercolors at the time, but I like the Jane Davenport. I just have a skin tone in my Daniel Smith, and I don't know where I put them at the moment. So I'm working on here shading eyes, and I've got to remember that when I'm trying to shade the eyes, if there are wet features around it, then it's going to bleed into those features. But her eyes, I never felt like I could get them quite right. So I'm adding some hair color, and I always tend to go with brown. I guess it's because I'm a brunette, and I just feel more comfortable with that. I have a hard time finding a blonde color that I like. So if you have a blonde color that you know of and are familiar with, I would love to hear what that is. Because I feel like if I do yellow, it looks like I painted her head yellow instead of it actually being a blonde. And again, I'm going back in with shading. I feel like I struggle with shading around the eyes the most. And I realized that I forgot her having eyebrows, so I have to add those in at some point. I'm always fascinated with faces. I feel like that they tell so much of a personality. They show, I guess, what whoever is drawing them, what they're feeling at the time. Sometimes they come out weird, but most of the time they just show so much personality. So here I'm going in and just trying to darken the parts of the eye that need to be darkened. And I've added in the white. I think that when you add in the white, that's when the eyes start to really pop. And I tried the Sharpie marker. I am not good at using the white-based Sharpies. So I always tend to go with the Uniball Signo. That just tends to be my go-to for white anything. They always work better. And then I always like to outline my eyes with the multi-ball palette. It just tends to be a very functional and reliable pen. I can always grab it and it's going to work. So yay, now she has eyebrows. And just adding a little more dimension to her hair and drawing her. And at some point I've just got to say, okay, I'm done with her. Like, this is enough time on her. When I do that, I then start stamping. I was not happy with how this turned out. So I keep trying and I'm not happy with that, I'm not happy with that. But fortunately, when you're using distress oxides, you can spray them and get some streakiness instead of just having a stamped image there. So I did that and just added a little bit of color to the background, which I ended up liking how that was looking. And so now, when I tap my fingers, I'm just thinking, what do I want to do next? Because I like her, but what am I going to add? And I tend to always add a collage of some sort. It's just my go-to these days. So I'm pulling out some random bits and pieces. Some I cut with my Cricut. Some are just some things that packages were mailed in, or random pieces, a vintage ticket. Actually, 2 vintage tickets or coupons, and I'm liking how that's looking. I really like what that's adding to it. So then I pulled up my Tim Holtz Small Talk Snarky comments, which I try to hold in the sarcasm sometimes, but sometimes you just need it a little bit. And I felt like on this it was very, it worked, as you'll see when I put the phrase on there. So I'm snipping that because I didn't want it to go all the way across my page. But I decided to glue it down first. I forgot to do that before I start putting down the words. And when I move a collage, I always have to remember how I did it to begin with, because I realized then I've messed it up and I didn't do what I wanted to do. I really didn't want that going over her hair, so I decided to glue part of it down and put the words down and then finish it. And the words say, I have absolutely no desire to fit in, which there's truth in that and untruth. I like being liked, but the Bible tells us that we're supposed to be in and not of the world. So sometimes I want to fit in. I don't want to fit in because I don't want to be worldly in that sense. And then I added a little bit more of a distress spray on there and squished it down with some packaging.